I'm as high as hell, and you're about to get shot. I'm as high as hell, and you're about to get shot. I'm as high as hell, and you're about to get shot.
How do we turn this off? Can you help me with
When I think about great comedy television, I find that I always go back to Community. And it's not just because I went to an actual community college for a time. It's because Community is the whole package. Intelligent, funny, and thoughtful, but also criminally underappreciated for its entire broadcast run. If you've never watched Community or forget the particulars, here's a quick rundown.
Give me some rum, time and a dream. Give me the hope to run out of steam.
Community is a sitcom that ran from 2009 to 2015 and followed a group of misfits from all walks of life who find themselves in a study group while attending Greendale Community College. And then it gets kind of weird from there.
Ignore what she's doing. We are serious.
Fine.
The show was, by all accounts, a cult hit right out the gate thanks to its ensemble cast and strong writing and direction. It was highly rated by critics, even as it was shifted from time slot to time slot and ratings plummeted.
I hate you so much!
It was eventually cancelled by NBC before being revived for its 6th and final seasons by, of all things, Yahoo, who tried to jumpstart their own streaming service, Yahoo Screen. This would also tank, possibly because they revived Community. In any case, it's a show that's obviously been around the block.
Got the body of a 5th grader.
Community is perhaps most well known for its numerous genre spoofs, which is especially interesting because it definitely didn't start that way. The first season was, outside of some wacky or sitcom-appropriate hijinks, relatively grounded. Then, right before the end of the season, we get contemporary American poultry, a send-up of Goodfellas and mafia movies.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be in a mafia movie. Cool.
And the ever-popular Modern Warfare, an episode that mashes together every action trope you can imagine, directed by Justin Lin, known for his work on the Fast and Furious movies, the greatest action franchise known to man.
Family.
What follows is what I consider to be some of the funniest television that I think has ever graced the silver screen. The second and third seasons of Community are basically a giant flex. What can't this show tackle? They do zombies, conspiracy thrillers, Dungeons and Dragons, mockumentaries and documentaries, and each one is as dedicated in parody as it is in homage.
Bling. A+. Nice work, Winger.
You know, I knew I could do it if I applied myself.
And that's the funny thing about their brand of parody. It rarely ever punches down, even when it's making fun of genre tropes or stereotypical characters. It takes itself and its genre of choice seriously every time, which in turn makes each increasingly weird setup and scenario simultaneously more plausible and funny.
From the lips of a ghost in the shadow of a unicorn's dream.
It's a far cry from some more pedestrian shows which often manage to conflate genre spoofing with legitimately mean-spirited mockery. Instead, Community understands intimately why we love procedural crime dramas and dorky 70s sci-fi, and dives in without a hint of irony because it loves those things too.
Yeah.
Can I get a picture? I want my future kids to know this happened.
I admire your optimism, Garrett.
As a case study, let's look at Season 3, Episode 14, Pillows and Blankets, which parodies Ken Burns documentaries. As a warning, I'm going to be discussing some spoilers, but if you don't care about that kind of stuff, go wild.
Abed, real stories, they don't have spoilers. You understand that TV and life are different, right?
Hey!
If you're unfamiliar with Ken Burns, he's a filmmaker and facilitator of so many PBS pledge drives through his documentary series on American history and culture, including baseball, jazz, and most importantly, the Civil War, which Pillows and Blankets directly homages. Ken Burns documentaries are known for featuring, among other things, mournful background music, celebrity voiceovers, and slowly panning the camera over still images. This is a technique called the rostrum effect, which might be more familiar to users of iMovie as, you guessed it, the Ken Burns effect. And while Burns uses these things to great dramatic effect in a legitimately serious documentary about the American Civil War, they are reappropriated by Community to an equally comic effect in their legitimately serious documentary about a pillow fight war between a pillow fort and a blanket fort.
Do people go to classes?
Pillows and Blankets is the climax of a multi-episode arc following the growing rift between the show's most iconic duo, Troy and Abed, played by Donald Glover and Danny Pudi. They're fan favorites for a reason.
We've gone mainstream. Initiate Protocol Omega.
They are unashamed weirdos whose friendship is basically unbreakable until, of course, Season 3, during which the two begin to separate over the very eccentricities that brought them together. namely Abed's insular worldview clashing with Troy's realization that he can no longer enable Abed's irresponsible behavior. The conflict comes to a head when both Troy and Abed separately construct their own forts, made of blankets and pillows respectively, and both sides battle for control of the school, with the fate of their friendship and a Guinness World Record at stake. The whole thing is absolutely silly, from the elaborate bedding-themed costumes to Keith David's deadpan narration.
He is part man, part pillow. All carnage.
But here is an existential threat to Troy and Abed's friendship. We can take it seriously because it's a real character-driven conflict and not just a reason for, elaborate bedding-themed costumes and Keith David's deadpan narration. Though to be fair, I would pay money to hear him read a car manual.
Pictured here lying down. Troy does not take Abed's email lying down.
It's important to note that Pillows and Blankets is actually the show's third documentary parody. The first, intermediate documentary filmmaking, pokes fun at mockumentary sitcoms like The Office or Parks and Rec.
I'm excited about the narrative facility of the documentary format. It's easier to tell a complex story when you could just cut to people explaining things to the camera.
The second, documentary filmmaking redux, parodies and refers to in name Hearts of Darkness, the documentary about the troubled production of Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now.
Way better than Apocalypse Now.
So not only do they clearly do their research, they have the capacity to satirize and celebrate genre within genre, which is its own kind of meta. It's kind of Community's brand.
There are a lot of layers to this. It's almost too conceptual to follow, but I love it.
Pillows and Blankets is one of my favorite episodes of Community, both for the juxtaposition of the subject matter with its format, as well as the fact that, like every other episode, no matter how silly or weird, the show uses genre as a vehicle for its characters, their idiosyncrasies, and more importantly, their relationships to one another. And yet, in spite of Community's strength here, their methodology does end up falling flat sometimes, though it's through no fault of their own.
Well, then I'm writing this down. Wait. Here's a pen. Thank you.
As an example, my least favorite genre episodes are Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas and G.I. Jeff, both of which turn the show into animated parodies of holiday stop-motion movies and G.I. Joe respectively. I have close to zero cultural context for both of these things. I wasn't an 80s kid, and by the time I was old enough to care about holiday specials, my parents had already gotten me a PlayStation.
Fake murdering people? It's gonna be my new holiday tradition.
Likewise, even though I love them, I'm sure plenty of people found the D&D episodes to be kind of hokey or boring since they're basically dorky bottle episodes with a ton of weird fantasy jargon. I think in these examples, the show does well to keep itself as accessible as possible. But the fact remains that sometimes people just aren't going to get it because it requires a pretty wide breadth of pop cultural knowledge.
If that's sarcasm, I can't tell, because everything in this game is silly.
And this is sort of a blessing and a curse. If you understand or get the stuff that the show is joking about, it's the sharpest, funniest show on TV. But if you aren't even moderately pop culture literate, the show starts to show its weaknesses. For example, they dunk on Jim Belushi a bunch of times.
Truth is ketchup. It's Jim Belushi.
That's the Jim Belushi of speech openings.
I'm the center slice of a square cheese pizza. You're Jim Belushi.
Does anyone under 30 know who this is? Or even his much more popular older brother who died in the 80s and to whom he is implicitly compared to in each of these dunks?
Boy, that guy's really taking a pounding in this conversation.
This isn't to say I don't appreciate the volume of pop culture obscura. It's just understandable that for as many people who loved it, just as many were probably turned off by the fact that every other joke or more flew over their heads. And for better or worse, this gets worse, or is it better, with each passing season.
They love when you shuffle the words around.
And speaking of worst seasons, I think we should talk about Season 4, which is universally held to be the worst of the bunch. And after rewatching it in preparation for this video, I have to say it still is. Creator Dan Harmon, better known now for Rick and Morty, was fired from his role as showrunner after Season 3, the premiere of which had already been cut short with the removal from its place on NBC's mid-season schedule. Thus, a waylaid writing staff who by all accounts were led in their work by a very involved Harmon attempted to forge ahead with the 4th season with very mixed results.
I just felt a strange disturbance.
Did you have dairy this morning?
Could be that. Or it could be that Great Evil's nearby. I'll take a provisional lactate.
It's kind of fascinating how bad this season is because of how much of the show's carcass still remains. The meat's just sort of been picked clean, leaving only a skeleton and gristle, and that skeleton is the spectacularly acted cast and the gristle being their dysfunction. None of these characters would feel particularly out of place in your standard sitcom, but Community deconstructs them under the harsh, revealing light of reality. The starry-eyed go-getter honor roll student is a neurotic former drug addict estranged from her family.
With the pumpkins and the sweeties.
Being younger does not make me inferior. If anything, your age indicates that you've made bad life decisions.
Shirley has a response to that.
Your saccharine sweet Christian housewife is also a judgmental religious fundamentalist divorcee.
I'm sure I've made some bad life decisions, and maybe Annie's decisions will be better. But I think she needs to decide whether she wants to be considered a child or an adult, because children get pity, but not respect, and adults, they get respect, but they also get the back of their head grabbed and their face pushed through jukeboxes.
Okay, why don't
The witty, handsome leading man is as charming as he is a self-absorbed, manipulative asshole.
Let's discuss this creepiness. Pardon you?
What are you doing?
I'm certified.
Season 4, however, has every character take massive steps backward to extract forced melodrama like marrow or some other meat-based analogy that I don't want to keep pushing because I'm grossing myself out. Instead of learning to deal with their dysfunctions, Community's cast become defined by them, and with it goes the show's heart. Characters and their relationships get distilled down to their quirks with little to no room for complexity or nuance. Annie becomes an unprincipled control freak. The Dean is a vindictive, creepy stalker. Abed is a pop culture reference machine when he isn't relegated to a B-plot or worse, the background. The obvious takeaway here is to avoid Season 4, though even I have to admit that its 7th and 8th episodes, Economics of Marine Biology and Her Story of Dance, are actually pretty decent. If you want a taste of the season's best, I recommend checking those out. Otherwise, I consider the 5th and 6th seasons of Community to be a return to form, if unfortunately short.
Cut to everyone on campus getting as drunk as they want montage.
I'm as high as hell, and you're about to get shot. I'm as high as hell, and you're about to get shot.
Community at its peak understands that while the cast is made up of imperfect, broken people, it's their bond with each other that helps them confront their flaws and fears, and ultimately makes them better people. Community is about family, the ones you are born into, and more importantly, the ones you make. But it's also about the redemption that awaits when you allow people to help you. And the thing is, this redemption isn't perfect either. Community knows intimately that imperfection, failure, and loss are not human faults, but features. Ones we must accept if we hope to be the better person that we know we can be. You can find all 6 seasons of Community on Netflix and Hulu. If you'd like another weird ensemble comedy, I recommend The Good Place, created by Michael Schur, also known for The Office, Parks and Recreation, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. The show follows Eleanor Shellstrop, played by Kristen Bell, who finds herself in the titular Good Place, which is basically heaven with all the rewards that come with it. However, since she actually spent her life being terrible, she realizes that she was sent to the good place by mistake and must learn to become a good person while trying to avoid the suspicions of the architect, played by Ted Danson. It's got great, witty writing, a seriously funny cast, and it never overstays its welcome, running for precisely 4 seasons before ending last January. You can find The Good Place on Netflix. Thanks for watching.